Hey everyone, welcome back. So people have said that they would like more videos on portraiture, and so this is a continuation of my portraiture series. And so I'm going to be showing you a little bit of a different type of portrait in that this person, it's going to be like a profile silhouette view with her eyes are kind of a little bit downcast. So it's going to just be a little bit different than some of the other ones that I've drawn, which are sort of more like, your traditional looking straight on portraits. So, anytime you're doing portraits, what you want to be trying to do is look at proportions. And by proportions, I kind of mean like there's, things you can learn about like traditional proportions and some basics like that. There's a lot of videos out there on YouTube on, the Loomis method and things like that. What I actually find though to be the most helpful is just using your observational skills and starting out really lightly and like not committing quite right away. So as you notice, as I'm starting out with my pencil sketch, everything is really light and I'm just kind of like mapping things out and I'm looking at it to sort of see like, does that look right? And does that make sense? So even with the chin here, you notice that I have like these different lines. And towards the end, I'll kind of come back to the chin, but like, I start and I'm like, trying to be sure about where things are supposed to be in the placements. And there's some basic things that you can kind of remember. The one of the main ones that I always talk about in terms of proportions that people should always know is that the eyes are kind of about halfway down from the top of the head to the chin. The ear is sort of like in relationship, like sort of between the eyebrows and the bottom of the nose. A lot of times when people are doing silhouettes, one thing that they sort of have an issue with is that they don't give enough space between the eye and the nose. Like they kind of put the eye and the nose on top of each other. And then there's a good amount of space actually between the eye and the ear, right? So if you look at the space between the eye and the ear, there's a good amount of space there. So a lot of times when people are trying portraits, it's fine to look at this idea of proportions and those other videos of like some of the basics. Certainly the thing about the eye is really helpful. Different things like that are good, but you always want to still be using your observational skills that you're working on. And if you've been watching some of my videos, you'll be really familiar, on this channel. One of the things that I really try to focus on is how you hone your observational skills. And so, if observational skills is something that you're kind of continuing to work on, I'll link in the description a couple of videos that I think are good to watch about observational skills. So, a tip that I have when you're starting out the sketchy part of your drawing is you'll notice that I'm actually using the side of the pencil, like I'm not using the tip of the pencil. And the reason to do that is that when you use the side, it's much lighter and you're not like pressing in and you're not pressing graphite actually into the surface of your page. So, if you do need to erase anything, it's really, really easy to erase. And when I'm drawing, as I get more confident in that, okay, yeah, that looks right, and I'm happy with where something is, then I'll start kind of darkening it up a little bit. But I always start with a really light, kind of wispy pencil sketch. I think that that's very helpful. And in terms of the pencil that I'm using a 4B pencil. And so what that means is it's the hardness or softness of the pencil. So your traditional like yellow number 2 pencil is an HB, and you're not going to be able to get the full value range if you're only using an HB. So for beginning drawers, that's something that a lot of times people don't really get. So a lot of times when artists are using, and you see these really, really great drawings, wherever, they're usually using, maybe like a full range of their pencil. So, you could be using maybe a 2B or a 4B. And what that corresponds to is how soft the pencil. So the higher the number with the B's, so a 6B or an 8B is a softer pencil, which means that you can get a darker mark. So you're just literally not going to be able to get that dark of a mark if you're only using an HB. And if you're using, say, like a 2H or an H, those are harder pencils and they are going to be even, not as dark at all. So if you want to get more of a value range where you can see here, I have, these darker marks that I'm able to make, use a 4B, a 6B, a 2B, whatever. That will really help. And I think that will really transform your drawing. So my third tip, and this is related to what we were talking about a second ago with the pencil, because the pencil is essentially what's going to help you get contrast, but is to get a full range of value contrast. So contrast is basically just having, a range of dark marks in addition to mid-tone values, in addition to light values. and you'll notice that like the amount of dark values, like especially on the nose there, right? The fact that there's some dark values and then they're in relationship to the light values. And the same thing on the lips too. You know, you've got the upper lip that's darker and then the bottom lip is a little bit lighter, and I'm putting some shadow underneath the lips. That contrast is going to make it look a little bit more striking than if you don't have a lot of contrast. And so I don't, in this drawing, I'm not really doing a lot with like blending. I'm not worrying about any of that kind of stuff. I want it to continue to be kind of sketchy in this drawing. But by pressing down a little bit with your pencil, you'll notice that you can get a really nice value range. So my fourth tip is that you want to, as you're drawing, kind of modify and make changes with the shapes as necessary, right? So sometimes people, when they're drawing, they rather start with kind of like a perfect pencil sketch where everything is exactly in the right place. I tend to actually do things a little bit more where I kind of have them sort of in the right place, but then as I'm going, I'm still looking at what I'm drawing and I'm making some slight adjustments here and there. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. And in fact, I think it can be a good strategy to help your drawing. So one thing that I noticed as I was drawing was that the lip, like the shape wasn't quite right. Like the way that with the silhouette, it kind of like you're trying to give an impression that the face comes around because of course there's a part of the face that's not in view. So making those slight adjustments on the shapes is really important and useful thing to do. If you're not already a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. Also, if you like the video, please actually hit the like button and leave a comment. So that helps it go out to more people because YouTube apparently cares about that. And so if you are willing to do that, that would be really helpful. And I greatly appreciate it. Okay, let's go into the fifth tip. So for my last tip, and maybe I should have talked about this at the beginning, but whenever I'm looking at, selecting a picture to draw, I think it is useful to make sure that it's a big, pretty detailed photograph. Like if you're going to work from a photograph, you can also, of course, work from life, have somebody sit for you, or do a self-portrait. Self-portraits are great because you can always use a self-portrait because you can look at yourself in the mirror. But when you're selecting a photograph, a small photograph doesn't work well. So you want to make sure that it's a big photograph that is very clear and detailed. And then in terms of your own scale on the page, you want it to kind of like fill up the page. Think about the composition of how it is on the page. So I wouldn't draw it any smaller than this. Like this is, just a regular 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You can go bigger than this. That's great. But I would just avoid smaller. So sometimes people are trying to make a portrait, but they're working, in this small little tiny space. That just won't work very well. And same goes with the photograph. Like if you're trying to observe from a tiny little photograph, it's just going to be very difficult. So make sure that you kind of always set yourself up to do the best job and have those kinds of things. Okay, last thing, even though I said that that was going to be my last tip, I'm going to give you one more, and that is think about varying your line quality. So notice in this drawing that, around the ear, I did kind of more of a scribbly type of marks. Around the hair, there was a little bit more of wispy marks. Sometimes I'm using the side of the pencil. Sometimes I'm using the tip of the pencil. So it's always good to kind of vary your marks when you're doing your sketches. It'll make for a more interesting drawing. It'll look a little bit more kind of vital and interesting and just a successful type of drawing. So those are the tips. Again, hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment, and check out more portraiture videos if you're interested. And I will see you next time. As always, thank you so much for joining.